You tell yourself you're enjoying life, but are you really? In the age of glowing screens and endless content, satisfaction has become a reflex, not a feeling. You reach for your phone not because you're curious, but because you're conditioned. You binge, not because you're hungry, but because you're bored. This is the new reality. Pleasure is no longer earned. It's injected. Habitually, compulsively, quietly. What Aldous Huxley foresaw wasn't a world where people are chained by fear, but one where they're comforted into submission. Control has taken on a different face. It's not brutal, it's indulgent. You are not forced to obey, you're simply offered so much pleasure that resistance fades away. And in this silent transaction, something far greater is lost. The price isn't the time you spend, it's not the energy you waste, it's the slow erosion of your will, the dulling of your capacity to feel, to think, to fight for meaning. You're not living in chains, you're living in cushions, but cushions can suffocate too. 1. The invisible habit. There's a ritual you repeat every day, though you hardly recognize it as such. A movement toward your phone, a scroll through an app, a bite taken without hunger. You call it routine. But behind it is something more insidious, an invisible pattern of obedience to impulses you no longer question. The modern world does not scream at you to comply. It whispers gently through design, through suggestion, through reward. And over time, those whispers become commands. Your behavior becomes less about intention and more about momentum. You act because you always have, not because you want to. This is how habit forms in the age of overstimulation, not through discipline but through exposure. When every platform competes for your attention, the most effective ones don't offer the best content. They offer the easiest access, the shortest loop from craving to response. The problem isn't that you're entertained, it's that you're conditioned to seek stimulation before reflection. The mind, like a muscle, responds to repetition. And in a culture that rewards immediacy, your instincts begin to favor the quick over the meaningful. This doesn't feel like control, that's what makes it so effective. There are no bars, no punishments, just convenience. And when pleasure is always available, you stop noticing how little of it actually satisfies. You become accustomed to consuming, not because you're drawn to joy, but because you're avoided. Ding stillness. Huxley understood this before it became reality. He imagined a world where distraction would be more effective than oppression, where freedom would erode not through violence, but through gratification. That world no longer needs to be imagined. It's the one you inhabit now. What's been taken from you isn't freedom in the obvious sense. It's your ability to pause, to step away from the loop and ask yourself, what am I doing and why? The more often you skip this question, the harder it becomes to answer. And when reflection disappears, so does direction. You start to confuse motion with meaning. The day feels full but hollow. The screen gives you something to look at but not to feel. Over time, you lose the distinction between being occupied and being alive. To regain clarity, you don't need to abandon all pleasure. You need to relearn choice. You need to recognize when you're following a script and when you are actually deciding. The first step is not rejection, but awareness. This awareness is uncomfortable. It pulls you out of the automatic. It shows you the cost of each click, each binge, each moment spent chasing something you didn't choose. But it also gives you leverage, because the moment you become aware of the habit, you're no longer fully inside it. True freedom isn't the absence of restriction, it's the presence of intention. And intention begins when you slow down enough. Hear yourself beneath the noise. 2. Freedom in disguise. You're told you're free because you can choose. You can pick from thousands of products, endless content, countless forms of entertainment. But what if this abundance doesn't reflect freedom, but masks its disappearance? At first glance, modern life appears rich with variety. But variety without meaning is simply distraction in costume. You are given options, yes, but those options are often built to keep you engaged, not fulfilled. Choice becomes a performance. You think you're deciding, but you're only reacting to what's been placed in front of you. Algorithms predict your preferences before you even know them. You scroll not because you're curious, but because it feels worse to stop. And so the illusion deepens. You think autonomy is measured by how many things you can click on, but autonomy without discernment is an empty shell. A person who cannot say no is no more free than one who is forced to say yes. Huxley warned of this exact trap, a society not of repression but of indulgence, a system where distraction would render people uninterested in truth. Not because truth is unavailable, but because it has to compete with endless entertainment. This system doesn't censor, it overwhelms. It buries clarity beneath layers of novelty. It makes deep thought feel unnecessary, even outdated. Why wrestle with hard ideas when you can swipe to the next distraction? The real danger is not that your choices are being taken, it's that your capacity to value them is being dulled. When everything is accessible, nothing feels sacred. When everything is replaceable, nothing feels worth the effort. So you move faster, you choose more, but each decision holds less weight. You skim across the surface of life, mistaking activity for agency. The world congratulates you for staying busy, but never asks if any of it matters. Real choice isn't about access, it's about intention. It's the ability to ignore the noise and pursue what matters, even when it's hard, especially when it's hard. That kind of freedom isn't offered, it's earned. To reclaim it, you must stop mistaking abundance for meaning. You must recognize that not every option is worth your energy. Not every offer deserves your attention. Sometimes the most powerful decision is not what you choose, but what you choose to leave behind. 3. The noise behind the silence. There is a reason you can't sit still anymore, a reason quiet moments feel uncomfortable. It's not because you've grown restless, it's because silence is no longer neutral. It has become a threat, a space where unfiltered thoughts emerge, and in a world full of noise, those thoughts are strangers. You turn to sound, to screens, to stimulation, not out of interest, but avoidance. The mind, no longer used to being still, begins to panic when it's not fed. And so you feed it, repeatedly, endlessly, with anything that will mute the discomfort of your own company. This isn't accidental. Every platform is built to fill the silence before you even feel it. Your boredom is their opportunity. The second you hesitate, they're ready, with music, news, updates, notifications. Not because you need them, but because you might start thinking without them. And thinking is risky. It can't be monetized, it can't be predicted. It might lead you away from what's easy. It might make you question the structures that profit from your distraction. The more you avoid silence, the more threatening it becomes. You forget how to be alone with your thoughts. You forget that stillness is where insight begins, not noise. You forget that some answers don't come in seconds. Instead, you chase fragments, quick opinions, half-read articles, out-of-context information. The mind becomes splintered, unable to connect, to hold, to reflect. You know more than ever, but understand less. Stillness requires practice. It requires you to sit through the itch to distract yourself. It asks you to endure the awkwardness of your own inner world until it softens, until it reveals something real. But the longer you go without it, the more distant that world becomes. You don't just lose concentration, you lose self-contact. You drift further from the part of you that isn't reacting but observing. That part is quiet, it does not show. Yaouyat. It waits for you in the silence. Relearning stillness is not easy. It may feel like withdrawal. From validation, from novelty, from the constant noise that once filled your mind. But on the other side is clarity. Not dramatic, but grounded. Not loud, but steady. Because when you reclaim silence, you reclaim the space where meaning lives. And in that space you can finally begin again. Not as a consumer of moments, but as someone present within them. So 4. The illusion of satisfaction. There's a particular emptiness that comes not from lack, but from excess. You felt it. After another binge of content, after another night of scrolling, after the last bite of a meal you didn't need, it's not hunger that follows. It's a strange hollowness. You were full, yet unfulfilled. This is the paradox of modern pleasure. It promises more than it delivers, but never enough for you to stop seeking. You stay caught in a loop, not because you're greedy, but because nothing ever satisfies for long. The moment ends and the need returns, stronger, louder, less conscious. Over time, this becomes normal. You stop expecting pleasure to be meaningful. You only expect it to keep you from feeling bored, anxious, or alone. The experience isn't the goal, the escape is. And so you return to it again and again, even when it feels hollow. The truth is, we've been trained to consume without presence, to reach for stimulation not because we want something, but because we're trying to avoid something else. The result is a life filled with activity, but no real engagement. Moments blur together. Joy becomes indistinguishable from habit. It's not addiction in the traditional sense. There are no dramatic withdrawals, no obvious damage. It's a softer erosion of attention, of patience, of the ability to remain in a state that isn't immediately pleasant. What's being lost is your capacity to wait, to want deeply, and to stay in that, wanting long enough to understand it. When every desire can be quickly met, it becomes harder to distinguish what matters from what merely distracts. Huxley foresaw a world where pleasure would not liberate, but pacify. And here we are, surrounded by comforts, but increasingly uneasy. Not because we lack, but because nothing touches us deeply anymore. The chase replaces the arrival. You are told that happiness is just around the corner. Just one more video, one more see, lick, one more purchase away. But corners don't end. They just lead to more of the same. And the longer you walk that path, the more distant true fulfillment feels. To reclaim satisfaction, you must question not the pleasures themselves, but your relationship with them. Ask not, do I enjoy this? But does this matter after it ends? If the answer is no, perhaps it's not pleasure at all, but distraction dressed in reward. True pleasure takes time. It often follows effort, not ease. It's found in the quiet after work well done, in the depth of a conversation that wasn't rushed, in the stillness you learn to sit with instead of avoiding. These are the moments that nourish rather than numb. The solution is not to eliminate enjoyment, but to slow it down, to stretch out the space between impulse and action, to allow desire to linger without immediately feeding it. In that delay, you'll begin to feel something that modern pleasure rarely gives you: clarity. 5. Effort becomes the enemy. You've been conditioned to believe that struggle is a sign something's wrong, that if a task feels heavy, it isn't meant for you, that friction means failure. But this idea is not liberating, it's disabling. It turns effort into the enemy and makes ease the only acceptable state. Look around. Everything is advertised as fast, simple, instant. As if the mere existence of effort devalues the result. We celebrate shortcuts more than mastery. We worship convenience more than resilience. In this climate, who has the patience to build anything meaningful? The answer is very few. Because meaning demands endurance. It asks you to keep showing up even when the reward isn't visible. But the modern mind, trained by rapid feedback and digital speed, loses patience quickly. It expects pleasure to arrive before commitment is tested. So, the moment something doesn't feel right, we leave. If the relationship gets hard, we swipe again. If the book requires focus, we stop reading. If a dream takes longer than expected, we revise it into things smaller. In this world, effort is seen not as a path, but as a problem. But that's a lie, a quiet, profitable lie. Because a population that expects life to be smooth is a population that won't rebel when it's disappointed. They'll simply retreat, consume, and stay compliant. If you never develop a relationship with difficulty, you'll never learn how to shape reality. You'll only learn how to tolerate it. The truth is, effort reveals what you care about. If you're willing to stay with something after the dopamine fades, then it means something. It shapes you. It turns desire into direction. Pleasure, when delayed, becomes powerful. But when it's demanded too soon, it robs you of your chance to grow. Every worthwhile pursuit requires the capacity to tolerate its opposite. Love requires confrontation. Art requires revision. Growth requires frustration. The things that enrich life don't feel good all the time, and that's exactly why they're worth it. 6. When focus fades. You weren't born fragmented. Your attention didn't arrive broken. Once you could sit with a book. Once you could listen without glancing at your phone. That ability wasn't lost overnight. It was slowly replaced, bit by bit, swipe by swipe. Focus doesn't disappear. It's overwritten. By notifications, by algorithms, by the quiet expectation that you should never be unreachable. Your attention has been auctioned off in micro moments, traded for metrics you don't benefit from. The result isn't just distraction, it's dependency. You begin to need stimulation like oxygen, not because it gives you something, but because the absence of it feels unbearable. Silence becomes unsettling. Concentration becomes exhausting. The deeper problem isn't that you can't focus, it's that the world has taught you not to. Everything around you is optimized for reaction, not reflection. The shorter your attention span, the easier you are to sell to sway, to silence. In Huxley's world, censorship wasn't necessary because no one was paying attention long enough to care. That prophecy has arrived, not through force, but through fatigue. A distracted mind doesn't rebel. It scrolls, it nods, it moves on. And in this fragmentation, thinking becomes optional. You form opinions not through study but exposure. You believe what feels familiar. You forget what you didn't screenshot. Thought itself becomes shallow, efficient but hollow. To rebuild focus is not just a personal task, it's a radical one. It's a refusal to be divided into impulses. It's a decision to sit longer with ideas, to tolerate the initial discomfort of slowness, not because it's easy, but because it's necessary. This won't feel natural at first. Relearning focus feels like waking up in a foreign room. But stay there long enough and you'll begin to see clearly again. You'll remember what it feels like to follow a thought from start to finish. To hold a question without needing an immediate answer. The ability to concentrate is not a trait, it's a practice. And like any practice, it can be recovered slowly, intentionally, not by rejecting all modern tools, but by using them on your terms, not theirs. Your mind isn't broken, it's interrupted. And the fewer interruptions you allow, the more space you'll create to think clearly again. 7. Mastery through waiting. Most people don't fail because they're weak. They fail because they expect results too soon. They've been taught that anything worth doing should feel good from the start. That discomfort is a signal to stop, rather than a step towards strength. Delayed gratification isn't a philosophy, it's a survival skill. In a world that celebrates the instant, the ability to endure the slow has become rare. Yet everything of lasting value, wisdom, depth, fulfillment, grows slowly. Waiting isn't passive, it's a test of your vision, of your patience, of your ability to act without immediate reward. When you delay pleasure, you don't deny it, you refine it. You teach yourself to recognize the difference between a passing urge and a lasting desire. This is not about rejecting joy. It's about choosing the kind that builds rather than burns, choosing the kind that leaves you stronger, not emptier. Modern life mocks this idea. It tempts you with shortcuts. It whispers that effort is outdated. But those who resist this noise become dangerous. not because they are aggressive, but because they are unshakable. Their minds are no longer pulled by every passing thrill. Their choices are no longer made by impulse. When you delay gratification, you widen your horizon. You begin to think in years, not minutes. You build not for applause, but for impact. And in doing so, you regain what most have lost, the ability to live on purpose. This isn't glamorous, it's often unseen. No one celebrates patience, but in that quiet space, you become someone capable of creating meaning where others only consume. To wait consciously is an act of power. To hold desire without obeying it is an act of mastery. You will still want, but you will no longer be ruled by what you want. And in that shift, your life begins to take shape, not as a series of reactions, but as a deliberate creation. You're not powerless, but you might be pacified. The danger of the modern world isn't that you suffer, but that you forget how to suffer with purpose. That you flee every ounce of discomfort until even effort feels unbearable. This is how strength fades, not in a single collapse, but in a series of small, unconscious surrenders to comfort. Huxley never feared censorship. He feared distraction. And now, distraction doesn't steal your voice. It dissolves your attention, erodes your persistent CE, and convinces you that thinking too deeply is unnecessary. In such a world, reclaiming your attention is no small act. It is rebellion. Real freedom begins not with escape, but with resistance. The resistance to ease, to noise, to numbness. Every time you choose presence over impulse, you sharpen what the world tries to dull. You don't have to abandon pleasure, but you must stop worshiping it. Otherwise, the very thing you chase will quietly consume the person you were meant to become.